Well, ladies and gentlemen, it would seem as if President Trump has finally had enough of the European Union's petulant behavior, and so now he's just shutting them down altogether. You see, for days now, President Trump has been blazing through the Middle East, securing billion-dollar deal after billion-dollar deal. These historic agreements are pouring unprecedented economic success back into the USA, leaving the European Union in the dust. In truth, President Trump is restructuring the entire global economy to finally put America first, and right now, he's absolutely knocking it out of the park. His deal making genius is reshaping trade to prioritize our prosperity here in America over all of this globalist nonsense. And so, in just the last couple of days, President Trump has locked in over $4 trillion worth of deals, including an $800 billion investment from Saudi Arabia, a $200 billion Boeing deal with Qatar, and a $1.4 trillion commitment from the United Arab Emirates. And now, folks, those are just the headliners. Dozens of smaller billion-dollar deals are stacking up too. President Trump's Middle East tour is a masterclass in prioritizing high-value partnerships over the European Union's stagnant, rigid economies. Here's the truth. President Trump's Middle Eastern deals finally puts America's interest first, sidelining the European Union's petty games. The EU has been dragging its feet, making unreasonable demands, and acting like a bunch of spoiled bureaucrats. As many of you know, the European Union has decided to play hardball during President Trump's trade negotiations, dragging their feet, posing unreasonable demands, and just generally being difficult to work with, which is strange because right now the European Union isn't exactly an economic powerhouse. In fact, as it relates to all of this, I've got a video that I want you all to take a look at, but before we do, I want to say real quick that if you guys enjoy the daily news updates, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a lot. But okay, check this out.
I want to bring in now Point Bridge Capital, their CEO and founder, and MAGA ETF founder, Hal Lambert. Hal, I just got to get your thoughts on this trip in general. I mean, it's been really amazing.
Amazing trip. I mean, what he's really doing, Charles, is reshaping global alliances. And, you can see he's effectively moving away from Europe. And the Middle East is where the action's at. That's where all the money's at. It's where it's a young population. Europe is aging. They don't have a lot of money. And look at the difference in the reception. The reception he received in the Middle East versus what the Europeans think about him. It's a whole different world that he's shaping.
Hey, listen, Europe is falling asleep. Europe is really our cautionary tale, though, isn't it?
It is.
It's like every time I hear an American politician point to Europe as an example we should be following, I say, are you nuts? I mean, it's a great place to visit, but that's it.
That's it. The tourism's their thing. I mean, there's not a lot of innovation going on. And it's tough because they've all become very socialist, and it's very difficult to do business there. So all the innovation comes here.
And so, folks, everything they just said is 100% true. Right now, the European Union has a lot of issues to deal with, and frankly, working out a trade deal with them isn't really President Trump's #1 priority right now, especially when considering that the European Union has proven to be incredibly difficult to deal with and that there are much bigger fish in the sea, or in this case, in the Middle East. The reality is, dealing with the European Union is an absolute bureaucratic nightmare with overregulated markets and an unparalleled level of negotiating rigidity. And so this, compounded with the European deal's minimal economic payoff, has led President Trump to sort of just put Europe on the back burner for the moment. We also know that there may be some underlying animosity, given President Trump has publicly said that the European Union is actually nastier than China in trade relations, further indicating President Trump's frustration with dealing with the European Union's bureaucratic nightmare. We've also heard from numerous members of the Trump administration that Europe has a sense of entitlement that makes them extremely difficult to work with, that their expectations in trade negotiations are completely out of touch with reality, ultimately expecting America to accept the short end of the stick. However, as we said earlier, the European Union isn't exactly in a strong position to be making demands right now. They're not exactly an economic behemoth, and they're not participating in any key or emerging markets like energy production, manufacturing, or artificial intelligence. The truth is, in these US-EU trade negotiations, President Trump is the one who holds all the cards. Europe is also similar to China in that the US imports more from the EU than we export to them, which means that when it comes to trade negotiations, we here in the US, being the primary importer, have a much stronger position to negotiate from because we're not as reliant on them as they are on us. So, when considering the European Union's mediocre economic future, on top of our trade imbalance, on top of all of the societal problems that they've adopted alongside the tens of millions of third world immigrants that they've accepted into Europe, once again, striking a deal with Europe really just isn't one of President Trump's top priorities right now. So, what seems to be very clear to me is that the European Union showed up to the field looking to play hardball, and in response, President Trump just decided to go to an entirely different, more prosperous field altogether. You can either play by the rules of America first, or you cannot play at all. That is how President Trump is conducting all of these trade negotiations. And so this is why so many members of the radically progressive global elite absolutely hate President Trump, because he doesn't play ball on their terms. In fact, like we said a moment ago, if he doesn't like the deal that he's being offered, he'll just go make a different deal altogether. Many of these other countries around the world, namely the countries in the European Union, have yet to realize that now that President Trump is back in office, the days of taking advantage of America have come to an end. Consider this for a moment. President Trump has actually managed to work out a new trade deal with China before he managed to work out a new deal with the European Union. So that makes you realize just how difficult the EU is to work with. Not only is the EU a bureaucratic nightmare, but over the last couple of decades, they've settled onto this expectation of being able to take advantage of the American economy, maintaining lopsided trade deals, and expecting free handouts, like how for decades now we've been covering the vast majority of Europe's defense budget. But so once again, now that President Trump is back in the White House, Europe is going to have to either get with the America First program, or they'll get left in the dust as we pursue more beneficial relationships elsewhere in the world. But you know what? As far as I'm concerned, this is exactly why we all voted for President Trump, because this is exactly what it looks like to put America first. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we wrap up, I do want to say real quick that we officially have a Morse News Twitter page as well as a Morse News Facebook page. So if you use either of those platforms, please go down below and drop a follow in order to get breaking news updates that relate to everything we talk about here in the YouTube videos. But everyone, that is going to be a wrap for today's video, so please go down below and drop a comment. Let me know what you think about all of this. Please like the video while you're down there, and like I said earlier, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. Thank you all very much for tuning in today, and of course, as always, stay safe.